Hey guys, welcome back to Sophisticakes. For this tutorial, I thought I'd take a stab at this stone-inspired fondant cake with a fried wafer paper flour. So first thing we need to do is go ahead and get our cake frosted. I started with a pre-crumb coated cake and I stuck it in the refrigerator for 20 minutes, or sometimes I stick it in the freezer for 10 minutes to get it to firm up, and then I go back in and I apply my final coat of buttercream. This is my American buttercream that I like to use for most of my designs. It's very bubble-free buttercream, and I will put a link to the recipe and the technique on how I make it into this video so that you can make it if you'd like to try to make it also. So go ahead and smooth it out as best as you can and bring that top lip in to the center. Now we don't need to have an overly thick layer of buttercream, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, get it pretty good because you're going to be covering it in fondant. So this is what I'm showing you here is fondant that I left out to crust over a little bit. I put it in front of a fan for about an hour till it kind of formed a skin on it because I wanted the texture of a slightly crusted over fondant. And then I just used some brown and some gold fondant. Now this fondant is actually gold. I bought it at, I believe, Hobby Lobby, but I think all fondant brands will have a gold. And I'm mixing them with some other colors, and some of these I left out overnight to get really dried out because I wanted those textures. I wanted the dryness, and just kind of lightly marble them together. You don't want to overly mix it so your colors completely blend into each other. But I used some more white and some brown, and then I had added some black in there as well. Now I'm checking both sides to see which one I like better, and I decided to go for the slightly busier pattern this time. Now to get some of those parts blended in that have some kind of really too abrupt of a line in between the colors of fondant, I used this fondant that some of it that I left out overnight, I actually put into a food processor because I wanted to really mix it into a finer crumb. And then I used some clear sugar crystals and also some, I'll show you here, some actually crystal or pearlized flakes, and just kind of pat it in where it seems like it would make sense in the pattern. I just kind of chose some lines there that I wanted to blend in and press those in, and those are the flakes that just adds a little bit of iridescence to it. Press it in with your hands and then go ahead and roll over it lightly to really work it in there, but you don't want to roll this fondant overly thin while you're working with it because yes, I'm gonna pull it apart, but I want to be in control of where it pulls apart. So I wouldn't go any thinner than maybe 1/4 of an inch before you start adding these other pieces of dried fondant. This is how you're going to get a lot of the texture. Now go ahead and brush off the extra, and if some of those pieces come out of the fondant, that's okay because it leaves kind of a little indentation in the fondant, and that adds just a little bit more texture, and we're good with that. Now just rip off some pieces where it seems it would be more organic. Kind of find the pieces that you like, that you want to kind of highlight, and make sure that you place those where you want them. Just kind of piecing these together. I did put a little shortening on the buttercream to get these to stick. You could add some water, or you could even add some simple syrup, brush that on if you want to get the fondant to stick. Now I seriously just randomly placed all this. Don't overthink it. Do not overthink it. Just grab the piece you want and place it on there. Just work with it. And even if some of the pieces don't completely match up together and there's a little gap, that's okay. Who cares? This is the design that you want it to be. Now, it does not take a whole lot of fondant to do this because by the time you have it rolled out and ready to place onto your cake, it's going to be fairly thin. So a little bit of fondant actually goes a long way. Now, I'm just using my smoothers to just go ahead and press it onto the cake. Make sure that it's attached there. Now, I wanted to use this bead mold that I have. It has multiple different sizes of beads on it. This is silicone mat I found online, and I'll link put a link to it on there if you would like to purchase this yourself. And I just marbled together some of the extra fondant. Some of the fondant I had already used, I just made sure that I marbled it together, press it into your mold with some cornstarch in the mold first, and then just kind of pull it out of the mold. And I went ahead and cut it into smaller pieces because I just wanted this kind of random bubbled texture on the front. And I'm just smoothing those edges down just a little bit with my fingers and then with a Dresden tool. And once you get the pieces cut the way you like them, all you have to do is add a little water to the back. And I don't put so much on there that it slides off. That's what I was doing right there, was wiping off some of the excess. And just place them maybe in a space that kind of has a void and doesn't make so much sense compared to the rest. And I had that little spot in between that I wanted to add those pieces to. Now remember, this is random, this is organic, this is natural-esque. It's abstract, so it's just the way that you want it to look. Now, to make these fried wafer paper flowers, this is a very easy technique. There's actually no oil involved. Frying it is a little deceiving of a word. It's just that you put it in a skillet, and that's where I get the term frying. And now you're just going to cut these into 3 different sized petals that are of the same shape. Now, I didn't even have a template, nothing like that. I just kind of eyeballed it because by the time you get them fried, they are going to kind of morph a little bit. They're not going to hold that shape. Now, this is just water with some food coloring in it, and I just used some ivory. I added quite a bit of ivory to it because these petals don't absorb a lot of the color. And you honestly just dip them in the water, put them on the pan right away, and just let the pan on medium heat, preheated medium heat, do the work for you. And when it's done frying, aka drying out, you'll be able to pull it right off the pan and set them aside till you're ready to work with them. Now I had taped together, this is what I did here, was I taped together 2 floral wires because I didn't have actually the thickness I wanted. You'd probably want about a 26 gauge wire, and I had much thinner than that. I'm not even sure what they were because they weren't in the box anymore. So I just used some floral wire and taped those together, formed a loop at the top. I'm taking my petals here. I kind of left a little edge, the bottom corner of it, not in the water so that I had something to work with. Brush on a little bit of, this is some rice paper glue, and which is basically just some water, distilled water, and some torn up pieces of rice paper, boiled in the microwave and cooled. And then just left to the side. And you don't want to use too much because you don't want it wet. And I just wrapped 3 of them together, and I set them aside to dry for a couple of hours. And then when I was ready to assemble them, I bent the wires just a little bit backwards so that they wouldn't be crowded on this flower. Now, I did not get this really in frame the way I wanted to, but I think you'll still get the point of it. And I'm just taking 1 petal at a time, placing it on the stem, which is basically the floral wire, and using the wire to wrap around it to get them anchored on. And you can actually manipulate these wires into position if they aren't exactly where you want them. Once you have it wrapped in the floral wire, you can use the needle nose pliers, grab the wire, and just kind of move them around a little bit so that they make a little bit more sense. This is an abstract flower, so it's not going to be it's going to be abstract, and that's okay. And if you have some pieces that seem a little longer or like on the tips of the flowers that you don't like the looks of them, you can go ahead once these are dry and snip those little tips off and get them into the right shape and size. I did do that, but I did not show it. Some of these pieces seemed a little long, some of these petals, so I just went ahead and snipped some of those off. And you can I don't know if you can tell, but you can try to tell in the final pictures of what it ended up looking like. And I cut off the excess of those wires, don't need those, and just wrap them all the way to the end since it will be sticking into the cake. And so you can see there how I can kind of manipulate it around a little bit. Now just go ahead and find a place on your cake that you think it looks the best in, and go ahead and stick it into your cake. You can stick a straw in first and then stick your flower in if you're worried about food safety. And just get those petals where you want them. Now I think this cake turned out gorgeous, and I think you guys will really like giving this a go. It's a lot easier than it looks. This is one of those designs you just have to dive in and do. Don't second guess it. Just trust yourself. And since it's abstract, however it ends up looking is going to be beautiful, and it's going to be your own design. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.